welcome to The Weekly Artifact. I'm Justin, and this is my co-host.
Hello, I'm Alex.
We're two former creative writing majors searching for meaning in a sea of content. Every other week, we will select one piece of content each, an article, a video, another podcast, or something else that we found particularly interesting and discuss it. As always, our comments are our own and not associated with any institution.
The show may contain explicit language or themes. See the show notes for specific content warnings.
This week, and this is our first week, my text that I picked is called Twins Get Some Mystifying Results When They Put 5 DNA Ancestry Kits to the Test. And it's from CBC News. The authors are Charles E. Agro and Luke Den. And I found this one from a Twitter account I follow, Rose Eveleth, who is the host of the Flash Forward podcast, which is a good podcast. You should check it out. The article, basically, there are two twins who have their DNA tested by different DNA companies. And not only do the individual companies return different results for the twins, but also the results from different companies do not match each other. So I'll go through the article and point out some highlights before I get into my commentary. Charles E. Agro and her twin sister Carly bought some DNA kits from Ancestry DNA, MyHeritage, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, and Living DNA. And they had them tested. And despite them having basically identical DNA from being twins, they did not receive matching results from any of the companies. So in most cases, the results from the same company trace each other's ancestry to the same parts of the world, albeit by varying percentages. So the article goes through and has some pictures that represent what percentages come from what part of the world. So it describes it. Charles E. has nearly 10% less broadly European ancestry than Carly, according to their tests. It also says they have different degrees of Eastern European heritage. So according to the raw data from 23andMe, 99.6% of those parts, that being the parts of their DNA, were the same, which is why Gerstein, who's one of the testers, they sent the results to Gerstein, who was helping them. He's a computational biologist at Yale, so he was looking at the results for them. Anyway, so because the DNA was 99.6% similar, Gerstein and his team were confused by the results. They concluded the raw data used by the other 4 companies was also statistically identical. Still, none of the 5 companies provide the same ancestry breakdown for the twins. Later, the article says that the story has to be the calculation. The way these calculations are run are different, is what Gerstein said. And they continue talking about it and basically talks about how the algorithms probably are different, which can affect the results. And then the company, one of the companies they talked to said, describes their results as, quote, statistical estimates. So that's sort of like the methodology behind this. And it continues on. There's some more pictures of the different regions that sort of shows them coming from. So some of the results were fairly similar and others were more off. I know one that jumped out to me was Family Tree DNA, which assigned 13 to 14% of the twins' ancestry to the Middle East. And that was significantly more than the other 4 companies, 2 of which found no trace at all. So that was a pretty sizable difference. And then later, talking to Paul Mayer, who's the chief geneticist at Family Tree DNA, he said, finding the boundaries is itself a kind of frontiering science, so I would say that makes it kind of a science and an art, which I think is an interesting quote. We'll come back to that, thinking about it as the...
Yeah, I got something to tell you about that.
So then it talks about how these tests sort of work. So basically they have what they call a reference panel, which they take other people's DNA that has been submitted and use that as a reference panel to sort of compare new samples that get sent in. And they sort of like basically match up your DNA with one of these reference panels. And the article says different companies use different panels, so they're each likely to provide the same customer with different ancestry results. And basically the larger the panel is, in theory, the better the quality will be. But the article also talking to Dr. Gravel. He's the population geneticist with McGill University. So Dr. Gravel says that you also run the risk of having missed diversity that you might not know existed in one particular region. So even with these panels, it still is sort of like based on guesses as to what kind of diversity might have existed in a region. And also the article says that there's an arbitrary way each company defines the world's regions. So they basically draw circles around different parts of the world and call it a region, but they might draw them differently.
Yeah, there's like absolutely no oversight on any of this. Is like the last like half of this article.
Yes, they expect sales over 100 million. It's a big business, but there's no really oversight to verify the results. And in theory, that's because the companies want to keep the data private. Yeah, and then it sort of ends by saying the results could always potentially change based on whether they get new results or not. So that's sort of the article. The reason why I was sort of thinking about this, I mean, I'm sure that part of the reason it was in my Twitter feed was because of the Elizabeth Warren angle, but we can leave that aside for now. But I was more interested in the just a general idea of DNA testing and sort of just the general foolishness of it. I guess I'll just say for now. I don't know if you seem like you have some stuff to say too, but just the whole concept of it is just odd to me that there's apparently all these people out there who care about where their ancestors came from, as if it sort of says something about they themselves personally. But it's, it just, I don't know, it just seems odd to me that a company could tell you something like, oh, this is where we think your ancestors came from. That changes something about your life. But
because the Third Reich was supposed to last for 1,000 years, but the Fourth Reich is when you get it right. So when that comes back around, we'll probably edit that joke out. I don't know.
One thing that this also made me think about too is just those Ancestry.com commercials. I don't know if you've seen them.
Have you seen the Kelly Ripa one where she's at the Italian bakery?
I'm not sure if I've seen.
I gotta play it for you because she tries to she pronounces she's like prosciutto 12, like that's how like an Italian would say 12, like it's an easy number to find the translation to, but for whatever reason 12 did not make the cut. She was ordering everything in Italian before she said 12. It's amazing. It's pretty offensive, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's hard to be offended if you're white and half Italian, but for just having a woman say I'm Italian now 12, it's a little fucking weird.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty blatant cultural appropriation. It's just kind of odd. But I was also just thinking, could you imagine if they had one of those commercials and it's someone thought they were white and then they found out they had an ancestor from Ghana and they started wearing a dashiki or something.
Oh my god!
I mean, I think they kind of get away with it just because they're sort of blending, similar countries. Will be like, oh, I thought I was German, but I'm, Polish or something, and no one really cares. But I feel like you could easily get into some hotter water there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's what I was wondering if anybody's try to use this to pull some am actually Latino, so I can check that box off and get some scholarship consideration because this box says I might be. So it also says one of the quotes that stuck out to me was that also says the tests tend to be more accurate for people with European ancestry. The more people have been tested, I just feel like white people give more of a shit for not good reasons, like you were suggesting, but also. And it says the more people that do it, the better it'll be. So don't do this for wait 10 years and then do it. Let everybody else do it and then do it if this is still a thing in 10 years. Then you'll have a way better access. I don't know, just don't do it now. It's a waste. It's like buying the first carbon monoxide detector.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's real good podcasting, Justin. Turn your fucking phone off.
Just edit that out.
Yeah, maybe. I was in the middle of a sentence. What do you mean edit that out? You're real lucky. You're real lucky that we get 2 separate audio files. Holy shit. I'm not editing any of this out, by the way. I'm gonna publicly shit on this platform. Fucking episode 1. Fucking turn your phone off. Anyway, as I was saying, just wait 10 years. I had such a good joke. It was right in the middle of the punchline of saying, don't be the guy that gets the first carbon monoxide detector. Let that shit run through for 10 years. You're gonna have a couple dozen people die because they don't know actually how they're doing yet, and it's fine, and then it works. God damn it. Anyway, what else did you have to say about it, Justin?
It was interesting too because I went to look at one of the Ancestry.com commercials just to make sure my eyes hadn't been deceiving me in the past. But I was looking at the comment sections for on YouTube, which I know is something you should never do.
No,
But
fuck,
but
buddy.
it was interesting a lot because obviously the commenters were all racist,
Sure.
but they were also against DNA testing.
But this is for the Ancestry.com
Hmm.
commercials where the woman's like, "Hot dog, I was related to George
Yeah,
Washington,"
this one.
or
I think
something
this
like
one. I
that.
can't remember. This one, the dude thought he was German, then found out he was Scottish. I think. But yeah, I mean, the comments were
Boy.
like super racist, but their overall point was that we're all American, and so it doesn't matter, which I thought was kind of a weird point to bring up in terms of. Well, in terms of DNA testing, I don't know what that means though.
That doesn't mean anything, but that's a fine mentality to have if you're not also like, but also like get out of the country and build a wall.
Yeah.
Like you can't do both. If you just want to be a nice guy, if you just want to be like a decent like person and just say, yeah, we're all Americans, like who gives a shit? Like that's the only thing that can actually shape you. Like just because you have like German blood doesn't mean you're like having an affinity to schnitzel. I mean, like maybe there's some weird thing where you're like more inclined to have like a heart attack or your like cholesterol is slightly higher, but probably not anyways. Like it just like it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but no, I was gonna make the same point you made about immigrants. It's like, well, by that logic, you should be fine with any immigrant who comes in. 'Cause
Right.
as soon as they're in America, they're American. But I don't know. I don't like to get into the minds of racists, but I mean,
And yet you
occasionally.
dove headfirst in the YouTube comments, so I can't really
Uh,
get some mixed signals from you.
gotta make sure you do your research.
Yeah, apparently.
But I mean, yeah, like I said, it's just people move around all the time, and so trying to like even if you found out you had whatever DNA, it doesn't really mean that they lived there. They could have lived
Oh
somewhere
yeah.
else, and I just like I don't know like what people are really looking for. I guess what I walk away with this from, and this would be my last point because we should move on to yours, but I feel like I guess what this means is just that people are looking for some sort of sense of identity that they don't feel like they have, which I think is just sort of an interesting commentary on our society and our culture, where we're sort of like so far removed from these old ideas of identity, but people are still trying to reach back to get some, at least their conception of what identity used to mean. But I think ultimately this is just sort of like a reminder that we need to sort of abandon these old views that we have on race and ethnicity, and sort of accept that we're
Right.
moving into a new sort of phase, whatever that might be, and we have to rethink what identity can mean. And then the very last thing I'll just say too, and you can add something else if you want, but I just want to make clear, I'm not saying that these companies are good or bad or endorsing them or not. This is just a commentary on the article and DNA testing in general.
Right. It's just dumb anyways, but like I would think to follow some stereotypes, if you're somebody that's mad about somebody else like having like German DNA or you not having German DNA and demanding you have it or something, and those type of people who like there's an inherent distrust in like the government or like something like that, like why would you like willingly like submit your
Oh
DNA to
yeah.
these like private companies? Is it a good idea? I like no, like you get away with the first murder because they don't have your fingerprint yet. Like don't just like spit in a bucket and send it to this like faceless organization that makes hundreds of $1,000,000 a year. You think like the government doesn't have their fingers in that? I'm not even that big of a conspiracy theorist, but like think a little.
Yeah.
Did Kelly Ripa really convince you that like this is like what you should be spending your money and like
It's just a
security
risk
on?
reward thing. There's no reward. A
There's no
company just
reward.
arbitrarily tells you where they think you're from, which that doesn't even necessarily have a basis in reality. And the risk is that you've now given away your DNA to a private company to do whatever they want with it.
And the second anybody says it's more art than science or it's art and science, it's just the science is gone. But like baking is a science because if you put too much sugar or salt, you're gonna fuck up your cupcakes. Cooking can be an art because you can like mix flavors, but like baking is like hard and fast. Like DNA testing, like we know like how DNA works. We have all the letters, the A, D, F, K, G, whatever the hell it is. But like you can't just be like, oh yeah, you're Polish because like your great grandmother like also looked like the guy that lived there that from like Mark in Minnesota gave us his DNA and it was kind of the same. So you're definitely Polish, even though like migrants have been existed since humans did. Like what are you talking about? There shouldn't be art behind DNA testing. It's a fake. Then it's not science. Like it's not a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I think art definitely has its place in certain things, but the way it's being deployed here is perhaps dubious.
Highly inappropriate. So that's that article. It's highly underwhelming. Consider not on the article itself, but the substance of it in the sense of DNA testing. And now we're gonna go to another segment that we're all another highly underwhelming, disappointing cultural touchstone. So my article was this we're having some fun editing this. My article is how MSG got a bad rap, flawed science and xenophobia by Anna Maria Berry Jester. Yikes.
Okay, you're gonna blame my phone, but you're just gonna let the dog bark. Okay.
Listen, well, to be fair, I'm gonna have to leave that in because I'm gonna reread it. I don't even know. Well, I'm gonna reread it. So the article is called "How MSG Got a Bad Rap: Flawed Science and Xenophobia" by Anna Maria Berry Jester from 538.com. So MSG stands for monosodium glutamate or glutamate. I'm not really sure which one, but. And I was gonna actually go buy some like concentrated MSG powder, but the inclement weather has not been very helpful in that regard. So I don't know what MSG tastes like by itself. I don't really think it tastes like anything. It's supposed to like enhance the umami flavor, which is just like savory. I don't know like why out of all of the like we found this new flavor. We decided like to use like the foreign word for this one, but we also have like sweets like and sour and salty. Like I don't know, but umami, savory. It was discovered in between 1907 or 1908, depending on which article you read, by a Japanese chemist named Kakune Akita when he was just trying to like sort of harness that flavoring, and it tastes good and it was fine. Everybody was happy about it and it just like worked. And he made a company like that produced it, and it's still like the biggest company producing MSG today, and made its way across to America, gaining popularity after World War II. People fighting in the Pacific, the American soldiers try the Japanese meal rations and like we're trying to figure out why it tastes so much better. It's because they had this like seasoning, and it made its biggest reference probably like touchdown is in the 1953 edition of Joy of Cooking, quoting it as the mysterious white powder of the Orient. So that might if history is any indication of anything, as soon as that somebody wrote that and published it, its time was limited. The whole point of this article is not a problem. MSG is fine and everybody needs to relax, but we're trying to figure out how we got there. And so what had happened was in 1968 in the New England Journal of Medicine, they published a letter from a physician, Dr. Robert Homan Kwok, who himself was a Chinese immigrant. And he published a letter to the editor complaining about pains radiating his arms, weakness, heart palpitations, and headaches that he would get after eating Chinese restaurants that served, quote, North Chinese food, which is the style of food that's common with most Chinese restaurants that exist in America. He hypothesized that cooking wine, MSG, or excessive salt might be to blame. So this was published and under the title of the Chinese restaurant syndrome, which is still what it's sort of referred to today. This one nothing letter set the course of the PR downfall. And this is kind of like if some woman without any medical training went on a talk show to say that her son got autism from a vaccine, and the entire nation was like, well, no more vaccines. That's fucking weird. Wouldn't that be a crazy thing to happen, Justin? Wouldn't that be an insane thing to happen? The most overarching thing is that since 1959, so 9 years before this article was written in the New England Journal of Medicine, the FDA has recognized MSG as generally recognized as safe food. It's been on that list since 1955. It's never not been on that list. Like, it's never been a problem. People just like don't care because some guy wrote the article and everybody was like, wait, me too. I also get the shakes from eating Chinese food. I know there's nothing else goes into Chinese food, and there definitely isn't a placebo effect after reading one guy say about that. It just caught like a wildfire, and they're still like reeling from it because if you check any Chinese restaurant probably with the menu will say no MSG added, which is probably isn't true, but it's also not a problem. And some foods presently that carry MSG carry the glutamate, which is the important part of the MSG. The monosodium is just how he was able to synthesize the molecule and stabilize it to make it like servable as its own like seasoning. The glutamate's where the flavor comes from. Glutamate is included in things like, to name a few, vegetable broth, chicken broth, canned tuna, canned soup, low-fat yogurts and ice creams, chips, and virtually anything, quote, ranch or cheese flavored. So anything in an American store aisle, like it's not, like you can't not eat it, and it's a naturally occurring thing. He got it from seaweed, and it's like in most meat with the umami, like savory flavor. But I know you watched that video, and a lot of that video had to do with the testing of it and like the bad like research. And so I read about that. But if you want to open that conversation up and take a crack at it, and I can sort of just fill in like extra gaps.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much extra to say about this. I thought it was insightful to point out that this is clearly a result of racism. But yeah, I mean the video I watched a video on it which was interesting. It just sort of talked about all the different foods that it can be found in and how even foods that say no MSG might still have it. The only well, I mean, I was gonna ask you if you would eat MSG now, but you already answered that. You said you were about to go out and buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. That does. I not only have I definitely already today, just because I like pounded some goldfish like this afternoon. It's not a thing to not eat. Like it's just like you've eaten it if you've had a snack or fast food, you've had it in the like since you've eaten that. Like it's not a bad thing. And like MSG isn't the reason fast food is shitty. They just put it on there because it makes it taste better. Like, there's no reason not to just like have it in your kitchen. Like you said, it's racist. And I don't think I said that outright. Maybe I did, but like it's like 5-10 years ago before this came to like America, we had them in internment camps, and we had Japanese people in internment camps, and it's not like we didn't have German people in internment camps. Like it wasn't a good relationship.
Yeah. I think also the only other thing I remember from the video was and we can link to this video in the show notes, but he would still recommend avoiding it only because foods that have it tend to be less healthy anyway.
Right. Yeah, and that's true. And you're right. And that's a fair thing. You should like you don't need to actively seek it out. And like if it has MSG, it might be indicative of the fact that like the quality of the food itself isn't as good as it could be. So they're sort of like using it to add on. You can use it. You can like if you're making a burger at your house and you like put MSG like on it, like if you like because it comes in like a powder form, like you can sprinkle it out like salt or something. It'll just make it taste better. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't make the burger worse for you. MSG is usually used on lower quality food because it's easier and cheaper than like just getting the freshest food. But it's not inherent to like just MSG. It's not like a bad thing. Like you put salt and fat in food to make it taste better. Like by no means is this like exclusive to MSG. And of course, like much like the anti-vaxxing, there was like a very small amount of very poorly done tests to try to prove this Chinese restaurant syndrome. And every research and experiment that was produced since like has not been able to redo any of the results. The original tests by neuroscientist John Olney found that mice suffered ill effects when researchers injected MSG directly into their brains. And the two things about that is one, humans only consume MSG by eating it, and so it's metabolized in their stomach, not directly in their brain. And the dose given to the mice directly in their brain were equivalent to what a horse would consume MSG, which is even higher than what a human would, let alone a goddamn mouse. So it's just like insane numbers used to like try to make a relationship that doesn't exist. And to even start having like bad effects on MSG, you'd have to eat like 6 times your like daily intake of MSG for it to like affect even people that have a sensitivity to it, which is very small. An average adult consumes 13 grams of glutamate just in protein, and then MSG contributes to about half a gram of that, or an additional half gram. So glutamate's already in you, just like let it in and stop being racist. And the like problem now is that like there's a lot of articles all over the place saying like MSG isn't bad, so like why bother talking about it now is because it's still relevant. There's still no MSG added, and all whenever I get Chinese takeout, every single menu has that. There's no right or wrong choice. Everybody decides what they want to eat and how they want to eat it. But like, you should know actually why you're making those decisions, not just because like your mom told you like people get headaches, so don't eat it, and you just take that at face value.
Yeah, I mean, I probably will still carry an MSG superstition, but uh, I guess you're eating it anyway, apparently. So
So you're eating glutamate no matter what. You're definitely eating glutamate just because it's in protein and just because it's like in like mushrooms and shit and like vegetables. You don't have to eat MSG necessarily, but that's just like saying you eat fat because it's on like a steak, like because just cows produce fat, but like you don't need to eat like trans saturated fat that's like added in to like fast food to make it taste better.
hmm
Like you're getting some kind of it, but it just doesn't have to be as like processed,
yeah, yeah,
and you can steer away from it, and it can be indicative of like whether the food is like of a higher quality or not. But the reason it's so broadly negated is because of this like bullshit from like the 60s
hmm yeah.
about like just yellow menace horse shit.
Cultural superstitions and stereotypes are hard to shake, which I think it mentioned that in the article, but
Yeah, it's gonna be a long time coming before like this is fully resolved. But like if one person hears this and is just like, all right, yeah, like fuck it, it's a step in the right direction. I'm sure my very abrasive personality will convince a lot of people, but it's worth knowing.
that concludes the first segment. So for the first time, we'll take some time to go into the safe room. So Alex, now that we are in the imaginary safe room, what do you have on your mind this week?
So what I already have in my mind this week. So there's a show on Netflix called You, like literally just like YOU, and it's about a stalker, and it's from the stalker's perspective. Like it's like over like voiceover narration pretty consistently. Like not every step, but like he narrates a good amount of like every episode. And sometimes the narration is like the other characters, but it's from a book, and it was originally aired on Lifetime, and it shows, and it feels like a Lifetime show kind. It's very melodramatic. It's like the Rotten Tomatoes critical consensus like refers to it as being like trashy, but also like exciting and like enticing, which is fine. But like it is trashy, and to full disclosure, I did not watch the first 3 episodes, but I watched 4 through 10, and I was horribly underwhelmed pretty much the whole time. I will start out with two good things. This spoilers from now on. Like this is full spoiler effect. So don't watch it anyways. Like I'm doing you a favor, but it's 10 episodes that are 10 hours of your life that you don't need to waste. The best part about the show is that about halfway through, this guy is in an apartment. He lives next door to this woman who's a nurse who has like a drug problem and has an abusive boyfriend and like a little kid that's like not the boyfriend's child, but like he's still like around. And at some point, the main character's name's Joe, like sort of gets in the middle and like helps the kid, and the nurse neighbor says, "I owe you a favor." And I thought when I said that, I'm like, listen, I see that a lot, and people say that a lot. People say that too loosely, in my opinion. This is perfect safe room talk, I think. That like, if you're gonna say I owe you a favor, I owe you one, and you do not set any limits, then like if I knock on your door at 3 a.m. shaking, like soaking wet, and say like I need every trash bag you have, and if you have like garden gloves, bring it too, because it's like time for that favor. Like that's on you. That's your fault. And so like I thought about that. I'm like, this show's not gonna like commit to it. But then later in the show, he gets shot in the leg, and he like walks into her, like shows up at her house like 2 a.m. saying like, remember that favor you owed me? And then she fucking helps him. She like sews him up, and she like gives him some medicine and like cleans his wounds. And that's exactly what I want to see, and that's exactly what I owe you a favor should mean.
So, are you defending the show now?
I'm saying that is the best part of the show. I actively
Okay.
like that part of the show. And so it's his POV, and he's obsessed with this one woman the whole time. And that's fine. And it's trying to be subversive because like, well, it's from like his POV, and you can be like sympathetic, and you can get where he's coming from. It doesn't really work. It didn't work for me at all. At no point did I forget what was happening or what he was about. But there's like a showdown at the end where he like locks her in a basement, and he's like colors are revealed. He's like killed like 3 people before this point. He's like a murderer. Like he like doesn't. There's not really any like limits with this dude, and they go back and forth. And she escapes, locks him up, and then he escapes, and then they like fight, and she like hits him in the head with a mallet, but she like can't get out because it's like double locked. And then he like at the very end he like grabs her and kills her, and she just dies. She's dead. He murders this woman who's like supposed to be, I don't know who's a sympathetic character in the show. That's the thing, because I don't give a shit about her. She's not great. I don't give a shit about him. He's a fucking psychopath. So I'm not rooting for anybody. I don't have like any stakes in the show. That's why the show's bad. I only kept watching it because my girlfriend was, and it's fine. And like, it's fine to watch a show with your girlfriend, and it's fun. But I didn't give a shit. And I told her as much. Like, neither of these characters are like compelling. None of the characters are. And so if it's like that's what TV's for, is for characters. But she's dead, and I don't care. And then there's a twist about like his old girlfriend coming back, but I also don't care because I don't care about him, and I certainly don't care about this girl that's hasn't been on the show at all. So like, it's a good subversive ending, kind of, because they kill the girl, she doesn't get away, and he like wins because nobody's like hunting him down really. But I don't care. That's like the real ending is this twist about like his ex-girlfriend coming back, and it still don't give a shit. But the particularly bad stuff is, like I said, the POV from the stalker. It's like very much like, I have to protect you and this and that, and like stalking on social media. I like don't even check that much, like 2-3 times a day, like at most. But like, with any sort of critical eye, at no point did they give you an option to suspend your disbelief, as far as like I'm concerned. Like, you at no point is it not like very apparent what this dude's doing. Granted, I like started like on episode 4, but even by episode 3, he had already killed her ex-boyfriend. Like, I didn't see that part, but like he killed somebody by episode 3. So I don't know, like, even if when I came in, like how you're like still like buying this dude's like shtick. Like, if you don't care that he killed him, that's fine. Like, if you're like, if like murder doesn't really like, oh well, that's whatever. Like, that doesn't actually like bother me, especially like watching a show, like that's fine. But like, that doesn't mean like you're like you should be rooting for this dude anyways. Like, that's like, just like, you can't, like, you can do both, I guess, but just like know why you're wrong. And then the best part of the show, besides the I owe you a favor, is like for 2 episodes at most, not even 2 full episodes, like he's a psychopath that's like controlling and a stalker, and so is the girl who's being stalked. Like, her best friend is also like a controlling stalker, sociopath, narcissist. And for a second, it seems like they're just gonna like have a head-to-head for the whole rest of the season, and you're like, oh shit, this is gonna be like tight, because like it can be like a 1v1 thing, like who wins, and he like kills her, and like by this next episode she's dead, just gone. And I'm like, okay, I guess, but now she's just the girl that you don't care about is just like sad, and he just like has to deal with that too. And like, I don't know, like it was like as challenged as he's ever been as a character trying to like figure this out, and then she's just dead again. And the writing isn't good. She's a poet, so fucking Christ. But as 2 creative writing majors, like, her thing is she's a poet and she's in an MFA in New York City. Like, fuck off. Like, but
we'll have to unpack our feelings about creative writing one day.
Absolutely. But like, her poetry isn't that good. Like, I only like heard her talk about one poem. Maybe she talks more about her, like, you get like hard examples of her writing in the beginning, but like the one poem I got isn't good. It's bad. It's a bad poem. And it's so like, well, fine. Like, art's subjective, kind of. But the best friend dies, and she's like being like sad and distant because like it's her problem because her friend died and she's sad about it, and he's just like seemingly trying to help. Like, a lot of the time, like, he's a stalker, but he doesn't do any, like, most of the time he's doing pretty like benign weird things that she doesn't know about, but she's still just like acting like a shithead. But at some point she tries to like make it up to him by like having some candlelit dinner in the basement of his like very like expensive place where he like refurbishes like old books. So it's like all this like old paper, and she just has like a dozen candles all over the fucking place. And he says like, this is a tinderbox, this is a bad idea, but you're worth it. Incorrect. Anyway, they're talking, and she just delivers this monologue about this old sleeping bag she had that was like a Little Mermaid bag, like sleeping bag, and it got super gross, but like she didn't want to get rid of it. And he's like, oh, like a security blanket. She's like, yeah, like a security blanket. And then like I lost it, but I didn't get rid of it myself, so I didn't feel bad about it. Kind of like when Nicole died, because I knew she wasn't that good of a friend, but I didn't have to make the decision. Metaphors theoretically exist in the real world, not like as cleanly as anybody would like, but because it's a literary device. But people don't just monologue. Like, you can, but it's usually bad. You're just like, why is this dude just rambling about a fucking sleeping bag? It's not fluid. It doesn't work. Like, it's okay in plays, but even still, you have to like make sure, like, you have to give a reason why this person gets to just like talk nonstop for like 2 minutes, and it better be good. Like, monologue should be like the highlight of an episode, and this was atrocious. Anyway, and lastly, he like is this psychopath stalker who's done this before and like gets away with killing 4 people, but the girl that he's obsessed with finds out that he's like a creep stalker murderer because he has this little box of like all the things he's kept, including the dead boyfriend's teeth, so the body can't get identified after he burns it, just in the ceiling in his bathroom, just like hiding like under like one of those like underneath one of those like removable tiles. Get a fucking safety deposit box. Get a hole in the ground. Get a second apartment out. Fucking something. Because like if you're saying like, well, safety deposit box, like police can get a warrant for that, they can get a fucking warrant for your apartment too, and you better fucking believe they're checking the bathroom ceiling when it has those big ass weird tiles. Like, just bad. It's just like a bad thing, and takes her like to like the last episode, and like when she hides it back, she like doesn't put the tile all the way back, which is not something you'd forget to do if you're trying to like finesse somebody. It's just, don't watch it, but you'd have to watch it because I can't, like, I wasn't writing down like every part of why it was bad, but those are some highlights, and those problems are consistent throughout, and they do like a lot of like people say it like in mid conversation, be like hashtag stupid, hashtag daddy problems, like in the middle of a like conversation. And that's a real good way to get fucking throat punched. Talk however you want. Like, you can say it, but, like, Jesus fuck, don't. Anyway, that's my safe room. Use a bad show, and it has a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, but we've talked before personally about that just means it's Rotten Tomatoes just means how, like, digestible it is, not how good it is.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you thought the show was serviceable, then that just registers in Rotten Tomatoes as being good.
It's technically fresh, and if everybody gives it technically fresh or barely fresh, it's still like 91% of people said it's fresh. Even if everybody gives it a D minus, it still gets like a degree. It doesn't mean you want that person like doing brain surgery. It just means they barely skidded by, and collectively like they got a degree. You don't see the grade, you just see like how many people said yes, not how much they said yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably. Honestly, the higher something has on Rotten Tomatoes, usually the worse it is. Honestly,
Yeah,
because
there's a real
art, usually good art, at least some people don't like it. But
right.
if everyone just says it's fine, that means it wasn't really saying anything in the first place. Usually,
Right. There's a real nice middle ground of like 65 to 70 is where like real like arty films can like live and exist. I would say a solid 50%, but Batman v Superman was still a bad film. It didn't deserve a 50 based on their metric, but like
I
that might be
I
an
listened
indicator
to
of
it
something.
an interesting but not entirely compelling defense of Batman v Superman the other day. But in any case, we should move on for the sake of
Yeah.
time.
What would you like to talk now that we are in the imaginary safe room together?
So mine I came up with last night as I was scrolling through my Twitter, but it's about these.
Always a good place to get material to be upset about.
Well, I figured the real news gets their news from Twitter, so you might as well just go to Twitter anyway.
Absolutely fair.
But it's about the story of the Omaha elder Nathan Phillips, who was, I don't know the proper word for it. I said harassed, but at least surrounded by Trump supporters in
They were
Washington,
screaming
D.C. Yeah, they
screaming
were,
build a wall at him. So like
yeah.
maybe the kid that was like very immediately in his face was intimidating. There's a better word, but like just being invasive if nothing else.
Hmm. From what I was able to find, Nathan Phillips, like I said, was an Omaha elder, a veteran of the Vietnam War, and a water protector at Standing Rock. And so he was in D.C. He was singing. I don't know if there was some significance to the song, but he had a drum and was doing a song. But the point is not really the story. I mean, that was bad enough, and obviously the people surrounding him were probably racist, but at least being pretty ignorant. But it just reminded me so much of when I was in Washington D.C. last year, and I know we were talking before, and you said you haven't been to D.C. in some time, but for people who have, ever since Trump got elected, you just see these sorts of people like they look like they're 13 years old, very look like they haven't seen the sun in some time, usually very scrawny and pale, and they just walk around in their MAGA hats, and it's just very bizarre. I mean, I guess what I think about them is it seems like they probably don't have a great home life. I know this is sort of like this is very speculative, but I think I'm coming back to a point. But because I was trying to figure out, why are these people? Because they don't even look like they're old enough to vote for the most part. And so I'm like, why are these people so supportive of Trump? And I don't really think it has anything to do with their personal politics necessarily, as much as they just see Trump as someone who is mean and rude, and they feel like they're not getting support at home, and so they want to take out their frustration however they can. And they sort of see Trump as someone who's just willing to be basically rude to other people. Again, that's my speculation, but I really do think you start to see that reflected if you watch the video with Nathan Phillips. It's like, why are they surrounding him in the first place? And even some point out, like, chanting "build the wall" to a Native American is just absolutely bizarre and ahistorical. But I don't think it's about facts or politics for them. I think it's just about how can we take out our personal frustrations on someone else, and that's how they do it. But I do feel somewhat positive about it, only in the sense that I don't think we can. I think we will win ultimately,
Right.
given that that's what we're up against. I mean, I don't, I'm not trying to stereotype,
You
but
mean
if you
like
just look at
in the
them, I
incoming
don't.
like
I feel
the
like we
impending
will.
race war of just like if
I'm not saying in the race war. I'm just saying they don't seem like the type of people that are strategic enough
to
or
what yell build a wall at a veteran who has literally only ever been in America. It's a real ballsy claim, Justin. They might be working in like a third dimensional underwater chess while we're playing tic tac toe.
I mean, I just think people lose sight of it sometimes. They think Trump supporters are some more powerful force than they are, when mostly they're just
No,
ignorant and looking for some sort of, I don't know, something that they feel like they're missing in their lives. And that's not a defense of Trump supporters. That's just me saying I don't think we
it's
have
just
that
where it
much
comes
reason.
from.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, and obviously Trump supporters have committed crimes against people, but in general, I don't think we have reason to be fearful in the long run. I think this will pass. That was my main takeaway. But I think also it is interesting too, just to see how easily Trump supporters can come together. And I do wonder if people on the left are able to do that, or if we're just too diverse of a sort of caucus to just wear a single hat, literally and metaphorically.
Politics is a game of like winning mostly, like it's votes, and so like well Trump got the votes, so like conservatives are like well we'll just like instead of like saying something even if we don't agree with what he's saying like we're just gonna like we'll just fall in line. You're like aiding and abetting or like forgiving allowing a racist like you're like racist adjacent is still racist, and so like you like yeah so it's a lot easier to be like well that guy's brown and I'm not brown so we don't like each other. I don't like him, and you're not also not brown, and you don't like brown people. So like we can all just be together because like how very apparent and immediate and like obvious like where our biggest concern is, even though it's a useless concern, it doesn't actually like make any sense. As opposed to like arguing about like the best way to do like universal healthcare. Like that's like
Mm-hmm.
what is like the overarching theme of like people like Trump supporters is like nationalism is like the best broad word I can use, and like that can be very easily like manifested in just racism, and it's like pretty easy to be like, well, that guy's not my color, so I don't like that guy. Where like I don't know the most overarching theme of like socialists or like left like I don't know we talked about this before I don't know like what the best word is to use, but like the reverse Trump is like fighting inequality or fighting like just like something like that, and like that's not that's more the answer is more nuanced than just saying like build a wall. Like that's building a wall doesn't work. Also, just to clear that out, like the majority of America still doesn't have a border. Like just going through Florida, like it's not going to stop anybody coming in from fucking anywhere else besides the guy that like lives against like in Mexico, like 10 feet away. Like everybody else, like California, like New York, nobody gives a shit about like Canada apparently, but like very liberal. I don't know. Like that's a whole other border. Just like look at a map of the U.S., see like where the border is with Mexico, and see how the rest of it isn't walled, and like see how good of it, how useful that is. Anyway, yeah, I like the same hat. The same hat works. That's a good one.
All right. Well, that will do it for this week. We'll have links to the text that we talked about in the show notes.
Music for the podcast was produced by Nicholas Pizzuto.
We don't currently have social media, but perhaps one day we will. But we will be back in 2 weeks to discuss some more texts, and we hope that you join us then.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. See you.